Good evening. Breaking news that's coming in. The United States has given details of the biggest threat it faces right now in these operations, and that's the existence of long-range missile strike capabilities that Iran still possesses. U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, he's very clearly said that the United States will continue to pursue this war as long as it takes. He gave details of operations so far. General Dan Kane was with him, and the details very clearly are about this wave after wave of offensive that has been carried out so far. On regime change, Pete Hegseth insisted that this isn't for them a regime change operation. The regime sure did change, a remark that's likely to fuel speculation on the long-term objectives. He stressed that the objective of this operation is clear. Iran must never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. He also said that, like earlier, this wouldn't be a forever war. It wouldn't go on forever and ever. The Pentagon said the campaign is designed to neutralize the specific threats aimed either at the United States or on their allies, and not to drag the United States into an endless war. I'll get you much more on the story, but first listen in to the American assessment after 57 hours plus of Operation Epic Fury.
This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. Today, in their desperation, the enemy is unmasked as Iranian missiles and drones rain down indiscriminately on the hotels, airports, apartments, and other civilian targets of their neighbors. Cowardly terrorist tactics from a regime that for decades has trafficked in cowardly terrorist tactics, lies, death, and destruction to this day. The Iranian leadership has built nothing except proxies and missiles and drones and deeply buried nuclear factories and facilities. Peaceful nuclear ambitions do not need to be buried underneath mountains. For 47 long years, the expansionist and Islamist regime in Tehran has waged a savage, one-sided war against America. They didn't always declare it openly, except for their constant chants of death to America. They did it through the blood of our people. Car bombs in Beirut, rocket attacks on our ships, murders at our embassies, roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan, funded and armed by Iranian Quds Force and IRGC killers. My generation of veterans carry the names of brothers who never came home. Brothers butchered by Iranian-backed roadside bombs and well-armed militias, thousands of our own. We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Their war on Americans has become our retribution against their Ayatollah and his death cult. To the media outlets and political left screaming endless wars, stop. This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes. Israel has clear missions as well, for which we are grateful. Capable partners, as we've said since the beginning, capable partners are good partners.
So one thing is very clear, there's massive intensification in operations both by Israel and by the United States. But keep one thing in mind, despite wave after wave of airstrikes and missile strikes, relentless punishment for Iran, Tehran continues to strike and strike back and strike back hard, widening the arc of this battle. Iran has targeted UK bases in Cyprus, US bases across the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, from the UAE to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. and I want to show you images. We'll just remove Pete Hegseth for a moment because I want you to look at images of 3 F-15s, 3 US Air Force F-15 Strike Eagle fighter jets that were downed in friendly fire in Kuwait. And is this what happens in war when it is relentlessly being pursued? It is being described as friendly fire. Remember, F-15s have the IFF system, identify friend or foe. So Kuwait has the Patriot missile defense shield. Patriot missiles, it seems, targeted the US F-15s. In a moment, we will show you with those visuals. Right now, you're looking at latest images on your television screens of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Just a short while back, Iran had claimed that they had systematically targeted Benjamin Netanyahu's office and residence. They said that targeted the Prime Minister's office and that nothing was known of Benjamin Netanyahu. So we called up Israel, got details from what sources tell India today. They did fire from Iran. They did fire a volley, a barrage of missiles, including, we are told, a hypersonic missile, but they were all intercepted by the multi-tiered missile defense shield, and they were taken down even before they came anywhere close to Israel's territory or Israel's borders. That's the information we have, and that is why, because it was being rumored that Benjamin Netanyahu has been targeted in retaliatory strikes, you're looking at those images of Israel's Prime Minister coming out and meeting people or going to a site of a missile strike in Jerusalem and around. I want to come back for a moment to our top story. Friendly fire, 3 F-15s downed. All 6 fighter pilots are safe, but the information that's available in public domain so far, 4 US personnel have lost their lives in this battle. US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Chairman Joint Forces General Dan Kane, they've given more details of those operations, and we'll get you more of those details. But big revelation that's coming in from the Israeli Defense Forces just moments ago. The IDF has just confirmed that they have dropped 2,500 bombs. 2,500 bombs from air and standoff distance. So rockets, missiles and bombs in just 57 hours. It's been 57 hours since this operation started on the 28th of February. 2,500 bombs have been dropped on 600 Iranian targets so far. Now, more than 150 ballistic missiles, dozens of missile launchers, they've been destroyed. I think Netanyahu is speaking. Let's try and listen in, though he's speaking in Hebrew. Let's try and listen in.
בבית שמש, וכפי שאנחנו מבינים כרגע, מרבית האנשים שהיו במרחב המוגן ניצלו. בתוך המרחב המוגן היו למעלה מ-20 איש שניצלו, נהרגו שם מספר מצומצם בודד מאוד של אנשים, שאר האנשים שנפגעו היו מחוץ למרחב המוגן. לכן, אזרחי ישראל, אני פונה אליכם לשמור על הנחיות פיקוד העורף, להימצא במרחב המוגן ברגע שיש אזעקות, מיגון מציל חיים.
אני מודה לראש הממשלה שהגיע לזירה הכל כך עצובה בבית שמש, אירוע שלא היה בתולדותיה של בית שמש, 9 הרוגים, למעלה מ-50 פצועים, פינינו אתמול 800 תושבים לבתי המלון בירושלים, אנחנו מתמודדים עם הרס רב ברדיוס של למעלה מקילומטר, שעות רבות של...
So the information that's available in public domain, the IDF has so far dropped 2,500 bombs on 600 Iranian targets, destroying 150 ballistic missiles, dozens of missile launchers, 200 air defense systems, 20 Iranian leadership targets. And these are statistics that we will just put out on your television screen for better appreciation. And just yesterday, speaking exclusively to India Today from Jerusalem, Ambassador Reuven Azar, Israel's ambassador to India, gave India Today exclusive details. IDF and the United States, they've so far identified 2,500 military targets to be taken down. Of those 2,500, so far, only 600 have been taken down. So that will give you an idea of the kind of intensification we can expect in these operations. Israel and the US have a very clear military aim. First military aim degrade Iran's military capabilities completely. No long-range missiles, no missile defense batteries, no systems that can target anybody. That's why they'll take down their missiles, they'll take down their missile manufacturing capabilities, they'll take down their navy, they'll sink their navy in the harbor. Their ports are being targeted. Bandar Abbas, for example, has been targeted. Decimate their missile manufacturing capabilities and ensure they don't have a bomb, a nuclear bomb. Listen in to Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, before I get you more on the story.
This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. Today, in their desperation, the enemy is unmasked, as Iranian missiles and drones rain down indiscriminately on the hotels, airports, apartments, and other civilian targets of their neighbors. Cowardly terrorist attack.
This is not a single overnight operation. The military objectives that CENTCOM and the Joint Force have been tasked with will take some time to achieve, and in some cases will be difficult and gritty work. We expect to take additional losses, and as always, we will work to minimize U.S. losses. But as the Secretary said, this is major combat operations. The United States Central Command, through the Secretary of War, received the final go order from President Trump. The President directed, and I quote, "Operation Epic Fury is approved. No aborts. Good luck," close quote. In the region, every element of the Joint Force made their final preparations. Air defense batteries readied themselves, checking their systems to respond to Iranian attacks. Pilots and crews rehearsed their strike packages for the final time. Air crews began loading their final weapons, and 2 carrier strike groups began to move towards their launching points. Across the globe, our operations centers came alive in Tampa, Florida, here at the Pentagon, and of course forward in the Central Command AOR. I am aware of the loss of 3 U.S. Air Force F-15Es overnight in the region. I am grateful for the safety of the crews, and we know that this was not from hostile enemy.
So this war in West Asia is now no longer limited to just 3 countries. It's not limited just to the United States and Israel targeting Iran. Look at the arc of this battle. It's spread far and wide, and we'll explain this to you on a map. What began as US-Israel strikes on Iran has now widened into a multi-front regional conflict with over a dozen nations directly or indirectly in the line of fire. More than 2,500 bombs dropped. Iran's Natanz nuclear facility has been targeted. In fact, apart from the 2 aircraft carrier strike groups that the US has in these waters, France is moving in its aircraft carrier strike group in the Mediterranean Sea. Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is moving into the Mediterranean Sea. Iran has hit back and hard, targeting US bases in Bahrain, launching drone strikes in Saudi Arabia, triggering a series of missile alerts across the region. Hezbollah opened another front in the northern part of Israel from the southern part of Lebanon. Israel, of course, hit back and hit back hard. India today now reports on this widening arc of the battle from Cyprus, where UK troops were targeted, UK assets were targeted, down to the UAE on the other side.
The war in West Asia is no longer just about 3 countries. It is expanding across borders. 14 nations are now directly or indirectly involved. The United States and Israel have opened their largest military front yet against Iran. More than 2,000 bombs dropped. The E3, Britain, France and Germany have stepped in. Europe is now part of battlefield equation. China has condemned the strikes. Russia has backed Iran at the IAEA. The diplomatic front is heating up. France has dispatched its nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle to the eastern Mediterranean. Iran is striking back. A US base in Bahrain targeted. Drone attack on a Saudi refinery. Missiles alert activated across Israel. Jordan has partially shut its airspace amid rising drone threats. Oil tanker MKD Vion attacked off Port Sultan Qaboos in Oman, triggering an explosion. Hezbollah has entered the war from Lebanon, firing rockets into northern Israel. Israel retaliates with heavy strikes in Beirut. Now, UN nuclear watchdog confirms that Iran's nuclear facility at Natanz was struck during the strikes.
Under international law, these strikes are unlawful and constitute crime of aggression. According to the IA resolution, such attacks are violation of the agency's statute. That's why Iran, joined by Russia and supported by China, called for a special session of the IAEA. These attacks are related to the core mandate of the agency. We ask the board to categorically condemn such attacks.
Aircraft carriers are moving. Missiles are flying. Global powers are choosing sides. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Beirut to the Gulf, from Washington to Beijing. The question tonight, is West Asia crisis spreading to other regions? Bureau Report, India Today.
So Israel, in just a short while back in a statement, said they've dropped more than 2,500 bombs on 600 targets across Iran since the start of this conflict 57 hours ago. You can just imagine the intensity of the bombing. 2,500 bombs over 57 hours, and this is the bombing intensity of Israel. America is carrying out its own bombing strikes. Imagine the coordination that would require to know when the fighter jets would go in, when the long-range missiles will strike, when other assets, for example, the Tomahawk cruise missiles, when they would be fired, and that is the kind of targeting of Iran that's currently going on. As Pete Hegseth said, the aim is to daze and disorient the enemy. But is the enemy dazed and disoriented, or is the enemy succeeding not just in striking back, but striking across a very wide arc, sending another message there? So 600 targets have been struck. These include about 150 ballistic missile sites, about a dozen missile launchers, dozens of missile launchers, 200 air defense systems, and 20 precision strikes on leadership targets. Now, IDF said initially they were more focused on bringing down the ballistic missile firing capabilities. Significant aspects of that has been targeted. Now the aim has shifted to decapitating the regime. The goal, the IDF now very clearly is saying, is a week from now, the regime should be so weakened that protesters gather courage to come out on the streets and topple it. So that is how a little more information about what the plan is filtering out. Joining me now on this India Today special broadcast is Michel Plitnick. He's president of the Rethinking Foreign Policy and Middle East political analyst who joins us on the show. Welcome. Berzin Wagmar is at the Center of Iranian Studies at SOS in London. Also with us is Brigadier General Reservist Yossi Kupavasa. He heads the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security. Gentlemen, welcome. Sandeep Punnithan, my colleague, with me. And let me begin by asking you, Mr. Wagmar, was the capability of Iran to strike back, in your appreciation, underestimated? Because both America and Israel have given us details of wave after wave after wave of strikes that have taken place, and Iran still continues to strike back and, in fact, widen the arc of their ability to strike.
They are desperate waves, that was already known to us. None of us are surprised because we know what is the sheer pain threshold of apocalyptic millenarian projection by this regime, which is part of its suicidal DNA since 1979. So there's no surprise at all about it. By radiating out, it wants to draw attention to the GCC, thinking they will panic and ask DC and Trump to stay his hand. Far from it. During the overnight talks, we know that MBS in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi have told Trump to persist and continue, and in fact stiffened his spine, which explains why Secretary Hegseth's lecture, as we saw just now, was quite frankly spitting blood. Even on the first hours, just after 9:15 Saturday morning, Gaurav, Iran's crown jewels were vaporized within minutes. I'm referring to the two S-300 battery, Russian S-300s that they had purchased in 2016. Gone. Not to mention the HQ-9B air defense ring around metropolitan Tehran, which is completely inactivated. And why does that then explain to you that the central IRGC headquarters in Tehran have been busted? And not to mention the intelligence ministry's main honchos have all been eliminated. So this is going to go on relentlessly. And Iran's bonkers delusionary calculus, which those of us in Iranian studies had worked out, was this. As I just pointed out to you earlier, thinking the GCC will run to Trump, telling him, let's back up and go back to the resumption of nuclear talks. Okay. Far from it. And they thought they would come back to the talks a tad bit more triumphant, gloating and dig their heels and make some more demands. Nothing of the sort. Is so much for strategic depth, which has all gone up in smoke.
But Brigadier Kapawasa, there are those, Brigadier General Kapawasa, if you can hear me, there are those who say Iran hasn't brought out its real weapons, its hypersonic missiles just as yet, or not the complete arsenal. What's been taken down are the not so expensive earlier generation missiles and drones. Would you buy that argument, or has Iran exhausted its best?
Well, Iran has not exhausted its capabilities, but it has used all kinds of capabilities that it has on the missile variety, and including what they term hypersonic missiles. They have used them too. They have used the missiles with heads that split and carry many explosives separately. They used everything they have, and they still have plenty of them. It's going to be a long war in this respect to get hit all the arsenal that they have. Is going to take some time, and they're still capable of launching missiles in our direction, not only in our direction, in the direction of the Gulf states, in the direction of Cyprus. If they wish to, they can launch missiles also towards Europe itself. So it's we are not exhausted their capabilities yet, and it's going to take some time. But look, the Israeli Air Force and the American Air Force are doing that together while at the same time dealing with the Iranian regime. And that's a formidable force that's going to hit a lot of those missiles, and especially launchers that they still have. And eventually, it's going to take some time, but eventually they're going to lose their capability.
So, Michel Plitnek, while Pete Hegseth insists that this will not become a forever war, they wouldn't be caught the way previous administrations were caught, either being in Afghanistan for 2 decades or spending a long time in Iraq. But this clearly wouldn't be a quick in, quick out. Would you want to hazard a guess how long would this continue, or is it going as per plan?
I mean, I think this will probably go on for several weeks. I think actually I agree with General Kupawatzer that Iran will continue more or less the strategy that it's pursuing right now until their resources are exhausted. I think that's more or less the Israeli and American plan. So, and obviously Iran's resources in this regard are finite, especially with the bombing attacks. I think that was all known. What Iran's, I think, trying to do here is to make, they know they're facing overwhelming military force. They have no chance of defeating the air power of the United States and Israel individually, let alone combined. So they are trying to make this victory on that side, if it is one, as costly as possible in order to deter future attacks and make it, make it too high a price. That's why we're seeing the strategy being pursued by Iran of attacking the neighboring Gulf states, as well as, of course, Israel. It might draw Europe in. I don't know about that. We're also, I think, only just starting with Hezbollah in Lebanon. We're only just starting to see Iranian allies either on their own or under the direction of Tehran, striking back on their own. And that could make this a much longer, broader war, even if the Iranian government does fall apart. I don't know that if enough is ignited around the region, I don't know that event would necessarily end the fighting.
Okay, the fighting would go on for long. We are getting a reaction from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he took stock of the destruction. We're told 10 people have so far lost their lives in the Iranian missile strikes that have taken place at various locations, including at Beit Shemesh. Iranian missiles had struck the Israeli city. 8 people were killed initially. 1 person lost his life. Later, we are told there was another death in another instance. So far, 10 people have lost their lives. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, has slammed Iran for targeting civilian areas. So he was seen in public after Iran claimed that it had carried out a hypersonic missile attack on Benjamin Netanyahu's office and that nobody knew where he was. So he's surfaced, he's made a statement. Listen in.
The tyrants of Tehran target civilians. We target the tyrants of Tehran to protect civilians. I've said for many years that they threaten not only Israel and not only America. They chant death to Israel, death to America. That's their ultimate target. But I said that they would also target those in between, that they would target Europe. They did. And if this regime, this terrorist regime of the kind we've never seen in the world, if they get nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them, ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will threaten all of humanity. So we set out to protect ourselves, but in so doing, we protect many others. And I want to say special thanks to our great friend and a great leader of the world, Donald Trump, for joining us in this crucial effort to save the world.
Sandeep, when you look at the intensity of operations that have been undertaken so far, considering Israel says it's fired 2,500 missiles and rockets into Iran, America Secretary of War Pete Hegseth gave details of 100 fighter jets taking off and wave after wave of airstrikes taking place, plus missile strikes, plus Tomahawk cruise missile strikes, from land, from sea, from air, and yet Iran continues to strike back. While this is just, these are very early days, but was Iran's capabilities underestimated? Were they underestimated? Or this is par for course?
Well, Gaurav, what we are seeing here is possibly unprecedented. In the last 23 years, we have not seen this tempo of air operations and the kind of bombing that you've just mentioned. Over 1,000 fighter sorties every day. Iran has fired over 800 projectiles in a day. This is, if you looked at the Gulf War in 1991, Saddam Hussein fired just 88 Scud missiles over a 1-month period. Iran is firing over 800 a day. So this is a kind of war that we've never seen in the past, Gaurav. And the fact is that there seems to be some element of miscalculation that they did not anticipate Iran's ability to continue fighting even after such a crippling blow like the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei being assassinated, and Iran continuing to fire missiles, in fact stepping up the tempo of attacks, firing missiles, cruise missiles, and expanding the zone of conflict from, all the way from Cyprus in the west to Oman in the east, targeting all of the Gulf Cooperative Council members, the 6 Arab sheikdoms that are south of the Persian Gulf. This is a kind of warfare that we've possibly never seen, Gaurav, and using the extensive amount of ballistic missiles, air power, all of this, and this points to a war that we've not seen and possibly some miscalculations have been made, Gaurav. The fact that
Brigadier,
Iran's
let me bring in Brigadier General Kapavasa into this conversation once again. General, in your appreciation, considering this is the intensity of the offensive that has taken place, Iran not only continues to strike back, but is widening the arc of the hit. Should there have been more dialogue with Iran? Because there are many who say, what was the immediate provocation for this war as far as the United States is concerned? And look at the apprehension. Spain, for example, and those are breaking news report that's just coming in. Spain, for example, is saying you cannot use our territory to carry out an offensive. A US president hit out at Keir Starmer saying you're not letting me use Diego Garcia for operations into Iran. There's apprehension that this could lead to trouble in the UK or Spain or other parts of Europe. Jen Kapavasa, can you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. Well, what I think is that, first of all, it's no surprise that the Iranians keep launching those missiles. And secondly, I think that we all understand that the Iranians were, their intention was to have a nuclear weapon, and the ballistic missiles were supposed to give them the umbrella under which they could be producing those nuclear weapons and then using them in order to launch them towards all kinds of targets with long-range ballistic missiles that can carry nuclear warheads. So it's definitely was necessary to take care of this threat. And if we would have waited more time, the number of ballistic missiles that they would have and the range was going to grow considerably. They were producing hundreds of these ballistic missiles a month with the help of China and to some extent Russia. And this is something that we realized how dangerous it was. And you cannot have a policy of appeasement to a country like that. And we saw during these 2-3 days exactly how dangerous they are. I think by now, everybody who has hesitated before understands the need to do something about this threat and why it was necessary to do it now and not wait until it was beyond repair. So I think that it's clear why we need to do that. Everybody understands that the other option of allowing them to go on with that was a very dangerous option. And we saw that when they were offered a deal that would put an end to their nuclear ambitions, they refused to accept the deal because they believe that they can get a nuclear weapon eventually.
You know, in an exclusive interview to India Today, even Abbas Araghchi, he said they had no intention of making a nuclear bomb. They weren't going in that direction. They were happy to come under every, aspect of investigation by the IAEA. They were willing to cooperate. So was there an immediate threat that led to this sudden offensive when even Oman was indicating that within 24 to 48 hours, they would seek some kind of a solution? But is the world a more dangerous place in your view now, Berzin Wagme, because apprehensions are there could be more terror strikes and intelligence agencies are already warning about it, whether in Europe, in the United States, in different parts of the world has suddenly become even more unsafe.
The terror problems will always be there. And again, that's par for the course because we know there are Iranian sleeper cells across Europe and sympathizers within leftist and left-center dispensations, which explains Prime Minister Sanchez's position and, of course, Keir Starmer's position, which is disgraceful. But then, of course, he has to pander to the Muslim politicking elements here, given local by-elections are coming up this May 2026. And Labour has taken a hammering. And this Labour government might not even last this year, come to think of it. But that's another case. To come back to your immediate query, Persian prevarication shows up Abbas Araghchi for what he's worth. As we do know now from what happened with the last set of talks Thursday past in Geneva, Washington had assured Tehran, you can have all the nuclear fuel in the world that you want, no questions asked. We will see to it, and everyone in the West will see to it. Just cap enrichment and ship out the 400 kilos that has already been enriched and sit. No was the answer. And then Washington again pressed, but we are giving you the nuclear fuel. You said you need it due to climate change and other energy crisis reasons for civilian purposes, as you purportedly tell us. So why not? but they wouldn't give an answer. And they stonewalled every request to discuss regional funding of terrorist proxies like Hamas, Houthi, Hezbollah. Can you give us an assurance that you won't? No answer. And also about what about the so-called red lines, the discussion of the ballistic missiles, approximately 5,000 and now depleting in your arsenal. Will you cap that as such also? Because some of them can be used for mounting nuclear warheads. Stonewalled again. So there was nothing to talk. Arakchi is a liar.
Okay, even as we speak, there's more breaking news coming in, and I want to bring in Sandeep on this. There's multiple loud explosions heard near the nuclear facility and the airbase in the central city of Isfahan in Iran. That's the information that is just coming in, and this is now being reported by news agencies in Iran. Hours after Iran claimed that their nuclear facility had been repeatedly targeted both by the US and Israel, a claim that was denied a short while back by the global nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency. There are reports of loud explosions being heard in Isfahan. Sandeep, I want to quickly bring you in. The wave after wave of airstrikes that are being carried out, 2,500 sites have been identified to be taken down, but Isfahan, Natanz, they were already taken down earlier, being targeted once again within 8 months?
Yes, absolutely, Gaurav. And you know, I think the US and Israel are making sure that those facilities can never be used again. There have been some reports of late that there have been some new constructions spotted in Isfahan, some new buildings have come up. There's some shelters that were built, so it's not very clear whether something had actually survived that wave of bombings in June 2025. And this is possibly the US and Israel making sure that those facilities can never be used again. And you know, the fact is that, Gaurav, after that bombing, midnight hammer that we saw last year, one assumed that the Iranian nuclear facilities had been completely destroyed. The words that President Trump used were obliterated. But very clearly, it seems that some of it has survived. And this is the US and Israel once again bombing those sites to make sure that nothing has survived. This is an ongoing operation, Gaurav, and you know, it's the 2,500 targets that Ambassador Ruben Azar told you. It's very clear that these nuclear facilities, including Isfahan, are one of them, Gaurav.
Mitchell Plitnick, the manner in which the bombing raids are being carried out, offensive action is being carried out, is this a just war? Was there any immediate threat to the United States? Was there any immediate threat to GCC countries? Suddenly they're in the line of fire. Should dialogue not have been pursued even further instead of making the world an unsafe place, or even more unsafe, as some analysts argue?
Look, this war is absolutely and fundamentally illegal under international law. The notion of preemptive strikes, which in this case is false in any event, that does not abrogate the most basic international and fundamental international law that states cannot attack other sovereign states unless it's in self-defense or approved by the Security Council. Those are the only two exceptions. Neither one of these apply here. So for the legality, even aside, it is based on, much as previous wars have been, on a falsehood. There is no threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon. That has been the assessment of national intelligence in the United States since 2007, and it has not changed, including under Donald Trump. It was reaffirmed by his own director of national intelligence just last year in congressional testimony. So this is just not true that there is a threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon. The missile program that is at issue with Iran certainly does make Iran a more formidable opponent, and therefore would be viewed as more of a threat, certainly by Israel and by the United States. But the Iranians have never used those missiles in an offensive first strike manner. And they do not have intercontinental missile technology, which is what you need to mount nuclear weapons, which they're not building in the first place. So what these demands sounded like to Tehran again, whether you like to think so or not, what they sounded like to Tehran was you have to surrender, and those are the basic conditions that will avoid
Very
this
pertinent
outcome
point.
of bombing. And the Iranian government was not willing to commit suicide.
So, Berzin Wagmar, respond to this. There was no immediate threat of a nuclear bomb being made, and clearly, what was the immediate provocation that another 24 to 48 hours for talks couldn't be given and that a war had to be undertaken, which is being described as blatantly illegal? It's not UN sanctioned. This would indicate one day you can go and attack Maduro in Venezuela, another day you can decapitate the head of Iran, the third day you could do it to any third country.
That is precisely what happened here. And we know the Omani foreign minister was on American TV the day before this attack started, saying that is a deal. We have a deal in hand, that Iran had agreed to only enrich what it needed for immediate use and would give up to the international community any excess. So that was what the the Omani foreign minister is somebody who rarely makes public appearances. He made a special appearance to tell us this, and the very next day this attack started. So this was not about a casus belli. This was about a long simmering desire from in Jerusalem and in Washington to replace
let me get Mr.
Iranian
Wagmar
regime
and
that
General
they've been against for
Kapawasa
40 years.
to quickly respond. Mr. Wagmar, you want to quickly respond to this?
Yes.
A correction that Iran's arsenal is purely defensive and not offensive, because your guest would realize, and most people don't, that the stockpile has not been developed with simply Jerusalem in mind. Just ask Pakistan what happened in January 2024 when those drones and missiles were lobbed into Balochistan province for 72 hours in a row. So that's point number one. And point number two, Iran has prevaricated and uses these techniques of sleight of hand all the time. So to say that it was only up to 60% weapons grade enrichment and not touching 90% flies in the face of Director General Rafael Grossi's report of last May 2025, which was submitted and which led to a formal declarative by the IAEA's members to say that Iran is in violation and is coming up to 90%. That needs to be pointed out too.
However, Sandeep, should this not have been a UN mandated offensive to ensure that it's not some countries that try and call the shots, or the United States that think it can get away by doing something in Venezuela on day one, Iran day two, tomorrow they could try and target a third country on day three?
Yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. And to carry out such unilateral operations is something like, the law of the jungle. I mean, you have completely arbitrary use of force against regimes. I'm not going into the, the ethics of those regimes or, the kind of human rights records that they have, but you can't do this kind of thing. It's expressly forbidden. There is a rules-based order that came up in post-1945, but, these clearly don't apply to the United States.
The last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, you want to respond to that? Israel very well justified in responding to terror post-October 7, 2023. Takedown proxies target Iran, but the manner in which, a military offensive is being undertaken without United Nations being on board. Is this a new world order that we're looking at?
First of all, it is a new world order a little bit, but it's this doesn't mean that what was said here is correct. First of all, Iran did launch missiles in our direction without any provocation from us back in April 24. That was the first time they did it. And then again in October 24. So it's they definitely used their missiles in order to hit us, and big salvos of 300 missiles were launched simultaneously. That was the case then. Now, secondly, about the intention to develop nuclear weapons, they did have the intention. They were having a group designed for that purpose, and the Americans didn't know about it until March 25. And when we briefed them in March 25, they changed their assessment, and they adopted our assessment that the Iranians are using this 60% and highly enriched uranium in order to produce 90% and move towards having nuclear weapons. Within a very short period of time, they were able to do that. And we have to remember the missiles they have are already able to carry nuclear warheads. They are not able to reach the United States. They're not intercontinental missiles, but they can reach Europe, and they definitely can reach Israel with a nuclear warhead. We have to take care of that. And
So
anyhow,
Israel-
of course,
Yes.
the 7th of October was a part of their plan with their proxies around us in order to hit Israel indirectly through their proxies. So the real problem in the Middle East and beyond the Middle East, and the real problem of security of the world, if you want to protect the world order, is to get rid of this regime. And that's what's so necessary to do right now. And we have an opportunity because they are so weak now. And yes, it goes along with the suffering and the sacrifice that we have to make, and the Americans are making, and we should appreciate the effort in this respect. But the world is going to be much better without this regime.
I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. Mitchell Plitnick, Berzin Wagmar, and General Kapawasa for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks. Remember, this situation is just intensifying. These are very, very early days of war. You're already seeing so many bombs fly in every direction. Do keep in mind, America is actually going to ration more resources to this region, and that's the first indication this would be a long, drawn-out affair. Afghan Taliban forces have reportedly launched armed drones targeting Pakistan's command and control structure at the Noor Khan Air Base in Rawalpindi. Remember, India Today, Indian Air Force had targeted the Noor Khan Air Base. India Today had reported that very extensively. Taliban forces have carried out drone strikes on key military installations in Pakistan, targeting not just the Noor Khan Air Base, but also a corps headquarters in Quetta and military installations, including a brigade headquarters in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We get you more in this report.
Afghanistan forces launched armed drone strikes on Pakistan's Noor Khan Air Base in Rawalpindi, targeting the command and control center. In an official statement, Afghanistan's Ministry of National Defense said it conducted precise and coordinated operations on key Pakistani military facilities. Noor Khan Air Base, Rawalpindi, 12th Division Headquarters, Quetta, military sites in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Noor Khan is a sensitive base. It was struck during India's Operation Sindoor in May 2025. Now fresh damage threatens to further expose vulnerabilities inside Pakistan's most guarded zones. The escalation intensified after Friday's cross-border strikes, with both sides targeting military outposts. Afghan sources allege Taliban strike hit areas including Faizabad, barely 5 kilometers from the Pakistani Prime Minister's office. Taliban officials have also claimed they shot down a Pakistani fighter jet over Jalalabad and captured the pilot. Islamabad has not confirmed the claim. Pakistan's internal security grid is once again under scrutiny. The question tonight, has Islamabad opened a front it cannot control? Bureau Report, India Today.
I want to bring in my colleague Sandeep Punithan for more on this. Sandeep, Taliban upskilling is actually Pakistan's worst nightmare coming true.
Absolutely, Gaurav. You know, for long, Pakistan is underinvested in its defenses along their western border because there was no such aerial capability that Afghanistan possessed. But today, the Taliban have demonstrated by hitting Noor Khan base. That's one of the most sensitive bases in Pakistan. It used to be called Chaklala Air Base earlier. That is where Field Marshal Asim Munir parks his private jet. That's where some very critical Pakistan military assets are located. That is close to the SPD headquarters, that is the Strategic Plans Division. It's one of the most sensitive air bases, and the fact that the Taliban have carried out such an attack with such brazen impunity, a broad daylight strike, that tells you how embarrassed the Pakistan military should be with this show, Gaurav.
Remember, even to take out Osama bin Laden, American forces had moved into Pakistan from the Afghanistan side. And remember, this time they've hit not just the Noor Khan Air Base, they've also hit the 12 Corps headquarters in Quetta and multiple military locations in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. We'll be tracking that story very, very closely as Durand Line, 2,600 kilometers of Durand Line remains on fire. Well, that is all I have for you on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks for watching. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.